Iconic game protagonists. Over the many years we have been introduced to so many memorable heroes. You have of course the self-insert protagonists, the characters you shape yourself within a story, but then there are also the defined protagonists, the ones especially popular over at PlayStation. A fully written hero in a world that we get to roleplay as. And these particular heroes evolved so much from the way they were designed in the early era of PlayStation to the later generations. They evolved in so many different ways. How? Well, let's start by going back all the way to the very beginning of PlayStation. The release of the PlayStation 1, all the way back in 1995. Back in the 90s, the primary target audience for the majority of game releases were still kids, and studios did everything they could to appeal to them. With the success of Mario and Sonic, many game studios went on a quest to find a mascot of their own, a character that appeals to everyone, one to represent their studio. The character they were looking for to be the protagonist of their games shouldn't be designed to represent a real person, but be absurd and different, over the top with a design that is memorable and stands out from the crowd. And a lot of major studios did find their mascot. Naughty Dog invented Crash Bandicoot, Insomniac invented Spyro, Ubisoft invented Rayman, and so on. These mascots and their games usually were very harmless and kid-friendly in design. Platformers were especially very popular on the PlayStation 1, especially in Western teams, which of course makes sense if they wanted their games to appeal to kids. With the new 3D graphics of the generation, there wasn't much violence you could get away with anymore. Of course, not every team really cared. Many teams, especially in Japan, did focus on mature games despite the more realistic graphics, with a mature playable protagonist already on the PS1. And they laid the foundations for a huge shift in character design and game design that would come for studios in the West later on as well. But with the launch of the PS2, at first not much changed. PlayStation found more similar game mascots, although they were a bit more graphic with their use of language and in their designs. Sly Cooper, Ratchet & Clank, and Jak and Daxter were all born at the start of the PS2 lifecycle. And many already existing PlayStation 1 mascots also got new installments in their respective franchises. But something was different in this new generation. Studios realized that a huge chunk of the PlayStation audience has now become teenagers. And with games becoming more and more confident in depicting violence on screen, with all the havoc and chaos players love to spread in games, a new protagonist was necessary, one that supports this type of game design. A new type of hero, the anti-hero. I think the franchise that perfectly illustrates this change in design philosophy is the Jak and Daxter franchise.
Say something! Just this once! I'm gonna kill Praxis!
That's quite a shift for the franchise, but it's also a huge one for PlayStation as a whole. The new generation of PlayStation heroes was very different than before. As characters, they represented real people more, yet very extreme in their personality and style. They are violent, deeply flawed, they hurt people and make really questionable decisions. Yet we can still empathize with them and support them on their journey. They are almost always really skilled and powerful, cocky and without doubt. While playing as them, we can live the ultimate power fantasy, and that makes them very popular characters, especially among teens. Like Dante for example, the wise-ass untouchable demon slayer that cracks a joke whenever he can. Nothing phases him, he is the ultimate badass. These characters in the PS2 era don't change much at all either. They always stick to their initial design philosophy. How Kratos represents anger and wrath for example. Initially, he didn't change much at all beyond how he was initially designed to be. Yet with the PlayStation 3 release and storytelling in games becoming more and more important in this new generation, the playable protagonist yet again has to adjust as well. The early PlayStation 3 years gave rise to many more memorable anti-heroes, with a very popular one being Nathan Drake. This character is yet again a lot more mature than Naughty Dog's previous protagonist, But that power fantasy aspect is still very strong. He's still an untouchable, cocky anti-hero, but he definitely goes much more through a hero's journey than the characters on the PS2. This new type of anti-hero experiences pain, loss, sadness, joy. They learn and grow just like we do by experiences we face along the way. But at this point, much of the growth still stays within respective games. The character goes right back to fully encompassing how they were designed to be by the next entry in the franchise. These characters were still very stylized with a look and behavior that could only exist within a character. We could see ourselves in them a bit more accurately, but now they were still very much over the top in design. But later in the generation, these anti-hero characters would evolve again, to be even more mature and be more emotionally written like an actual human. And of course, a popular game that I can use as an example for this shift is The Last of Us. We've arrived at modern day gaming now. Game protagonists now have become fully mature and have become less a stylized character. They are more realistically written in terms of what they say and how they act. They are less over the top in design and more grounded.
I guess I'm afraid.
One aspect of game protagonists that will never change, however, is that most of them will keep being anti-heroes. Games are more violent than ever, and a character is still needed that supports that type of gameplay. Another big example of a more mature written character is the new Kratos. He is now way more mature in his decision making, no longer driven by purely rage, and I personally love the journey he goes through. In the new God of War games, he learns from past mistakes and goes through much more of a personal journey. But is the new Kratos a better character than the old Kratos? Not necessarily. A character doesn't have to be written to act, grow, and show emotions like a real person in order to be a good character. A very stylized power fantasy protagonist that stays true to their nature can also be great or even better when done right. The thing is, the current gaming landscape, especially the Western one, just isn't a fan of these types of characters anymore. These steps being taken in character design yet again makes sense when you look at the shift in demographic that once again happened in this generation of games. Single player games now mostly appeal to young adults, people with actual income, and it makes sense. In today's era with all the free to play options, mostly adults will be the ones still paying $70 for a brand new single player release. That's just how it is. As we mature, so do the characters we inhabit in games, and many gamers seem to love having more maturely written characters in their games. But there are also lots that don't want to see their characters change, that aren't a big fan of this new type of storytelling and character writing. But like I said before, it's a new stage of character writing, and we are never going back. So you reached the end of this video. Glad to see you stayed all the way till the end, I appreciate it a lot. What do you think about the state of modern day game protagonists? Did I get anything wrong in how they evolved? Anything I failed to mention? Leave a comment down below, I always love reading your comments. Also don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, it helps me out a lot as a content creator. Thank you so much for watching and hopefully I'll be seeing you in the next video as well. Take care.